Dana Denho here, and this is Let's Watch with the Ann Arbor Film Festival. In a time when entertainment from the comfort of your own home is key, the Ann Arbor Film Festival has gathered renowned artists from all over the world for a virtual celebration of experimental art and cinema, while also hosting some in-person offerings in the downtown. Jex Blackmore is making waves around the world with art dedicated to our bodies and how we need to maintain control of our intimate personal lives. Welcome to the show, Jex.
Thanks for having me.
Jex, tell me a little bit about, how you got started in the world of art. What's your background and what led you to, what we're doing here today?
Sure. Yeah, I actually studied art history and archaeology at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And so that kind of introduced me to the world of radical political art, just in learning about different art movements. And I was a performer growing up as a child. So I was an opera singer until my early 20s and a theater performer. So it was kind of like those two parts of my background coupled with my interest in activism, where I started to kind of meld those things together and realize that the arts are an extremely powerful tool to communicate complex ideas to the public.
How did women's rights become such a hot topic for you? Because I think that's a recurring theme we see in a lot of your works.
Yeah, so I mean, I was, I think that women's rights impact me because I identify as a woman, and I've had to endure a lot of hardship as a result of that, as many people do, and I also became really interested in the way that religion shapes our worldview and the power that the church has on the freedoms that we are supposed to have, and also the way that we envision our body. That the fact that the church really defines, common perceptions of morality and ethics to our own detriment. So, realizing that, the concept of virginity, shame, sexual shame, the idea of what is indecent, or all of these things that I just found that in conflict with myself. And so I think that really, and I find that the sexual shame is very much associated with being a woman. So the fact that women are supposed to be modest or should be identified as like preparing for motherhood, and the value of that became very deeply disturbing to me. And also I had my own abortion. And when I had my own abortion, it really hit that there are these things that we don't talk about necessarily in the abortion debate about whether it's, right or wrong. And I think that in particular really stuck with me about how do we have more nuanced conversations about things like reproductive justice and the experience there.
An interesting thing that you mentioned, because I think this is a really hot topic right now because of this Britney Spears documentary that came out. And I don't know if you watched it or not. So I remember living through that time with Britney Spears and not thinking much of it. And it's because we're sort of learned to be okay with questions like, are you going to be a virgin until marriage? And like, to me now, looking back, and it's 2021 and watching this, I'm like, why were people asking her this? This is nobody's business at all. But at the time, and I don't know how you felt, but I didn't think anything of it until now, watching it back now. And that's so strange to me that I was okay with it then.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up in the same way. I remember being in middle school being like, oh, like, is it like, you're like a slut if you don't wait to marriage, or at least until you're like much older to have sex. And it's interesting because there's that standard. And there was like the whole purity ring phase, which I think I'm a little older than, but I remember very much being.
I remember that too. All these like musical acts were coming out, like the Jonas Brothers and stuff, and they had these purity rings, and it made absolutely like, what does it matter as an artist if you've had sex or not?
Right, exactly. And so I find that's one element of this that really resonated with me and was very much ingrained in my worldview. And I think that, there's this element of like purity and purity culture, and then there's this element of like over sexualizing women's bodies. So like the idea that Britney Spears like Hit Me One More Time was like, a woman dressed as a schoolgirl, and all of a sudden like basically sexualizing children in many ways for the male gaze, rather than just talking about children's sexuality, which I think we should do more of. But, so there's like this impossible standard to meet. And I think that is something that we ought to reckon with, because it has profound impacts on the way that women view their bodies and their self-worth.
I'm going to be honest with you about myself here for a minute, because since like I've been enlightened about this stuff, I've looked back to my time, like, in high school and dating and stuff, and I have had things happen to me. And I think you could ask any woman this, and they would agree that like I've had very shameful things happen to me that if I confronted that person now, they would probably be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah.
And I also think there was something wrong back in the day about like having multiple partners if you're a woman. So a man can have as many partners as he wants, but then even your own friends, your male friends would sort of slut shame you for having too many sexual partners. And to me, that is like absolutely despicable now. But at the time, I think it did bother me, but I didn't stand up for myself.
Right. Yeah, of course. Because it's not, outspoken female is something that people really put into a category of being bad, essentially. And so it's very uncomfortable. We don't have very many examples of how we are supposed to, talk about our bodies or talk or be how we're supposed to view ourselves as worthy, no matter what our sexual history is.
Well, since we're talking a little bit about our sexual history, let's watch as Jex brings the power back to the people with Sex Militant.
We are the collective. We are sex militants. You will rise as one, but also as many. Tonight we are all sex militants. We are all sex militants. We are all sex militants. Your body is your power, and it is a weapon. Feel the weight of your flesh, your muscles, your bones, your organs, heavy upon the ground. Feel your breath rise and fall, rise and fall. Note its warmth against your lips. Do you feel your heart beating against your chest? Do you feel the pulse of your blood? Consider the warmest parts of your body. Through your mind's eyes, visualize the heat lingering in your throat. Your armpits, your breasts, your genitalia. These are the parts of your body that inspire the most fear. These are the parts of your body that they seek to control. But we are not one tonight. We are many. Thank you for sharing this with us. And carry it with you as you go about. We are all sex militants.
We're back with Jex Blackmore. We watched Sex Militant. Talk about how our body empowers our weapon and why this is something that you really needed to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sexuality is still, especially in America, extremely taboo. We have a horrific sexual education system in this country. It's often led by people who are religious and teach things like abstinence and the fact that that you're dirty if you have sex. These are things that are just like archaic ideas that we are giving to our children, and they're growing up with complexes, understandably. And it's something that if we were able to talk about the reality of our sexual truths, that we are able to celebrate those aspects of ourselves and fight against the kind of oppression that is passed down from the state level that polices our own sexuality. So, we're very much under attack, and I believe strongly that this is actually violence against our bodies. I mean, the idea that when women are, or men even, or anyone of any sexuality feels shame about their sexuality, it can cause depression. It can lead to suicide. The idea that we don't educate women on pleasure often leads to an increase in sexual violence at a young age. There's plenty of models around the country about the ways that we can handle education about sex and legislation, therefore, but we don't think that it's important, or that we are still really struggling with how to talk about it openly in our society. And I think that is criminal, quite frankly. So a lot of my artwork revolves around not only getting people to kind of connect as a community or as individuals with their own sexual health and kind of well-being, but also to challenge the kind of repressive structures that exist, to acknowledge and change their teachings or their perspective or the legislation that is particularly attacks our sexual nature.
I mean, in your work, it seems like you almost have this fear, which I think is a good thing to have, that we're going to be losing our rights. We could lose our rights to have an abortion if we needed to. And that's a scary thought, because there's so many factors involved, and it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is at all. It's no one else's business. So talk about this political climate where you need to get this word out now, because it's something that we know about, but it's also something that might not be something that we're thinking at the forefront of our minds right now.
Right. Yeah, especially with kind of the political turmoil we've experienced and trauma we've experienced over the last few years. It's hard to think about these things. But it's vitally important that we do. Trump was able to bring in a whole bunch of conservative judges across the country, and states have taken advantage of that. Conservative states have taken advantage of that, especially where they have a large following of religious voters. I think yesterday in Arkansas, they passed a law that would completely restrict abortion unless the woman's life was in jeopardy, or in the case of rape or incest. And it's an unconstitutional measure, but they made it very clear, and even said out loud in press releases, that they know that this is unconstitutional, but they're trying to pass these laws to get up to the Supreme Court. So they are hoping that they will overturn Roe v. Wade. And if they do that, what they will do is put the right to an abortion back into the state's hands. So if you live in a place like Louisiana, or a place like Arkansas, or a place like Ohio, you might not have access to abortion at all, which means you would be forced to travel to the closest clinic if you could afford it, which is often hundreds of miles. And there's already people who live in these abortion deserts, and take time off of work, find childcare, get lodging and a place to stay. And then you have to wait there for days at a time. And it's essentially an act of shaming women for seeking an abortion. And I think that is something that we must pay attention to, because our sexual rights and freedoms are truly at the core of who we are. At least it's one extremely important facet of that. So it's critical that we are not only paying attention, but holding our legislators accountable. Even if it doesn't impact us currently, there's thousands and thousands of people who are capable of being pregnant that are are essentially in states of crisis, not because of needing an abortion, but because of the laws that surround abortion access.
So let's go back to this sex militant thing, because you mentioned this aspect of religion and politics sort of colliding to create the perfect storm to get rid of abortion and stuff like that. The Catholic Church actually protested your installation, right? How did that come about, and how did that feel? Did you feel like you were sort of like making moves and having your voice heard?
Well, I've been protested on several occasions before. And it kind of surprised me that exhibition in particular was a source of contention, in part because it was so solely focused on sex and not, so much of an attack on religion. But they took issue with the signage outside that said sex militant. And, we were planning a ritual the evening. They protested earlier in the day, but that evening we were planning kind of like this ritual immersive performance that kind of centered centered our bodies as a source of power. And I think that what it does is underscores that this is like the fact, like our bodies should not be offensive. Our sex should not be offensive. And I think that really shows you the power of the Catholic Church and how invested they are in this issue. And because the Catholic Church and because religious voters in the South in particular have a big impact on conservatives getting into office, what we see is this kind of merging of church and state that we talk about, that we want to avoid. The power that the church has in swing elections and donations, being able to fundraise off of the anti-abortion stance, for example, maintains so much power that it is to the detriment of our own well-being and health, and ultimately our sense of self and the freedom to be who we are.
You can experience one of Jex's installations on Ashley Street in downtown Ann Arbor during the month of March. Watch the trailer for An Undue Burden.
I guess if this body could overturn Roe v. Wade, that they would, but they're unable to do so. So the next thing to do is to put one hurdle after another to make certain that women don't have a right to exercise their decisions within the confines of the privacy of their homes in communications with doctors that they accuse.
Unfortunately, Roe v. Wade says you can't make a law. But until then, we want to make it as difficult as possible for the people doing that. So that's what it's all about.
I just don't understand why our government forces us to suffer, to have more pain, and to make this more difficult than it already is. So we are suffering. And for what?
We just watched a small portion of An Undue Burden. Talk about how that 24-hour waiting period enforced before having an abortion became your inspiration for this piece.
Well, I had an abortion, and I've had 2 abortions actually, and I thought, well, something that was very interesting to me was the waiting period when you're pregnant but you can't get your abortion yet, and so you have to kind of go through life for sometimes several weeks, sometimes months. Knowing that you're pregnant, experiencing all the symptoms of a first trimester pregnancy, and not feeling comfortable sharing that with people, not being able to kind of tell your boss, like, that you are sick because you're pregnant, but don't worry, you're getting an abortion soon. But that's like something that we are just so uncomfortable with talking about. And it is a lot of stress. It is a lot of stress and burden. And the mandated waiting periods, which actually are at 25 states, in 25 states, there's mandated waiting periods to get an abortion procedure, which means you have to receive you're mandated to receive state information about abortion and the risks thereof, that again is written by a state entity rather than your doctor. And you have to sit on it and think about it to make sure that you've made the right decision from anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. So depending on the state, this might mean that you have to go to the clinic twice and then wait, or you could download the information and you still have to wait for it. And also because of these kinds of restrictions, if you forget to print out your form, you have to cancel your appointment. If you don't show up for your first kind of consultation, you have to cancel your appointment. And there's so many people that need access to abortions, and we have started closing down abortion clinics and defunding them, that people have to sometimes travel hundreds and hundreds of miles to get to their nearest clinic and then sit and wait. And, the argument from anti-abortion folks is that, what's the big deal about waiting? I wait to get people use obscene references, like I have to wait sometimes to get a part for my car. And it's like, well, our bodies aren't cars, and waiting is no minor thing, especially when you are someone that kind of relies on you live paycheck to paycheck. So the expense of having to travel somewhere and wait in general is just horrible. And I think that it's so offensive that it should be something that's not a big deal, because it's not a big deal to the legislators who oppose abortion access. And so I really started thinking about how can we have a conversation about the impact of these laws on people attempting to obtain an abortion without having a debate about the ethics of abortion. So, I could go on about that, but I think that is something, the conversation that is replayed over and over and over again. And I think what we could say is, do these laws that we've passed actually, are they doing what they're intended to do? And what is the harm caused by them? And versus, I think that people would say, well, it doesn't matter if it harms women, if it saves a baby. But I think that is placing the life of a fetus over the life of a person who's able to be pregnant. And I think that we also know that waiting periods don't impact the choice to have an abortion. So what they're doing is just punishing women and harming them a great deal. I've talked to hundreds of pregnant people who have had to deal with this, and it's ruining their, the shame and the guilt and the feeling of pain. Of course, not everybody feels shame or guilt at all when it comes to their abortion, but it stems from this punishment handed down by the state that says you aren't capable of deciding what's right for your body. So we're going to tell you that you're either a murderer or life begins at conception, so you're a murderer, and you're going to sit and you're going to think about it, and you're going to think about it in shame and in isolation until you can do what you need to do to take care of your body. And so I really wanted to kind of put people in a place where they understand the burden of that waiting period, that time. In 24 hours, when you just talk about it, conceptually seems very minor, or 48 or 72. But it's not. So the film is really intended to kind of put people in the personal space of a woman waiting for her abortion, and to really contend with her waiting period in their own lives. So when you go to work, she's getting up and brushing her teeth, and then when you're when in the middle of the afternoon, she's just reading a book, or it's not very exciting, admittedly. But I think that the idea is that we are, as the public, are stepping into this kind of interior private space and kind of violating that, and kind of aligning our timeline and our lived experience with that of thousands of people around the country every day.
I like that you added that you had your own abortion, because it really makes us understand that you understand this waiting period that you have to go through, because I didn't even know that was a thing. And I don't think it's something that's talked about unless you've talked to a friend that's had an abortion, or someone that's really open about it, because we don't talk about abortion very often,
Right. Yeah.
So when you come experience this film, this whole installation experience, is it beneficial to, stop by maybe one time of the day and then come back later and see what's happening later in the day, since it is a full 24-hour experience?
Yeah, I think that that's a great way to come back at different points of the day, because some of the shots are like 3 or 4 hours long. So coming back from time to time would be the best way to view it. And also on the website that I've set up for this film at undueburden.com, you can also share your abortion experience. You don't have to be a person who's had an abortion. You can be a partner of someone who's had an abortion, but just I'm really interested in collecting stories from people who have had to endure this form of state control. And I think that the stories collected, and of course it's anonymous, would really help other people who are going through this, and also potentially provide a resource to make a political stance and request a change in legislation based on constituent experiences.
Yeah, and let's end this judgment about it, because you shouldn't be judged about this anymore.
Yeah.
Why did you feel like the Ann Arbor Film Festival was the perfect vehicle to premiere this work?
I mean, the Ann Arbor Film Festival has an incredible reputation as one of the oldest film festivals in the country, and also it's so rare to find a film festival who will show experimental work on this scale. 24 hours is a huge undertaking, so that's another factor. And also, it's really important to me that this film is shown in public spaces. So I know that the Ann Arbor Film Festival kind of got that part of this work, and that is critically important to me as a filmmaker to merge those two, like the film world with the outside world. And so they were supportive the whole way through and making it happen. And I'm really grateful that this is the first time I'm able to show it publicly through the Ann Arbor Film Festival.
Well, before we go, why don't you just tell people why they should check out this year's Ann Arbor Film Festival? It's virtual, or if we're local like me, and we can walk downtown and head out over to Ashley Street and experience your work for ourselves.
Well, films have the capacity to really make us think differently about the world around us or about our internal selves. And I think that this world and the years that we've just experienced through the pandemic has been extremely difficult and challenging. And it's a great way to kind of step outside and experience art, even if it's online, new art that can really take us away, and also have us provide an opportunity for self-reflection. And also there's filmmakers and artists who've worked so hard on making beautiful, beautiful works for us to consume and for us to learn from. And so we owe it to them, and we owe it to ourselves to take the time to experience the film festival.
Well, thank you, Jex, for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
To watch this and other CTN series, visit youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor. And remember to like, comment, and share. I'm Dana Denthoff for Let's Watch with the Ann Arbor Film Festival.